Hello, Reeses and Kit Kats. Happy Friday. Okay, today we're going to do a review of the distributive property. You guys should all have a worksheet that looks like this. Notice at the top, it used to say exponents in order of operations. We're actually doing the distributive property, so you can cross it off and write that instead. That was my bad. I forgot to change it from the past few days. Okay, so we have a few types of problems on this worksheet. The first is just basic solve or simplifying using the distributive property. Another one is writing equivalent or choosing equivalent expressions. And then the last one is correcting silly Sandys, which by now we all should be pretty good at. Okay, so let's look at this first problem. This first problem says rewrite using the distributive property. And it's 3, and then in parentheses, g plus 2. Okay, I know it's been a while since we've done the distributive property, but what the distributive property means is that we're taking the number on the outside, and because there are parentheses there, we know that means multiplication because we don't see a sign in between the number and the parentheses. So we need to take that number and multiply it by everything inside the parentheses. So what we're going to do is we're going to distribute that 3 to both the g and the 2. Those arrows mean we're going to be multiplying it. So it's going to be 3g, because we distributed 3 to the g. Keep this sign in the middle, so that we keep the plus sign, and then we rewrite 3 times 2. The biggest mistake that people make when doing the distributive property is that they forget this 3 right here. So they just do 3g plus 2. The distributive property tells us that we have to distribute the 3 to all the terms or values inside the parentheses. So the answer is actually 3 times g plus 3 times 2. We can simplify this even further because you guys all know what 3 times 2 is, to be 3g plus 6. Okay, copy this down in your notes and then let's take a look at the next one. So the next problem tells us, it says circle all that are equivalent to 2 plus 5 times 4. Remember that when we do the distributive property, the number outside the parentheses can be behind the parentheses or in front of the parentheses. This is the exact same thing as writing the 4 here. It's because of the commutative property of multiplication, if you remember that vocab word. But let's move the 4 back because of how it's written in the problem. So I see this, it's all numbers. I know how to solve numbers, right? I use my order of operations. So I'll do the parentheses first. That's 7 times 4, 28. Wait, but hold up. None of my answers are 28. So they must be asking for something different, because I know that this is 28, but I don't see any answers that look like this. So I look at those answers, and I think to myself, these answers look like they're asking me to rewrite the expression using the distributive property. So erase this, or cross it out, because yeah, that's right, but that's not what this problem wants us to do. So instead, I'm going to try doing this using the distributive property. So I'm going to distribute the 4 to the 2. So 4 times 2. Keep the sign in the middle, plus, and then distribute the 4 to the 5. So 4 times 5. Now I'm going to look at my answers. Letter C, even though it wrote the multiplication differently, looks really similar to this. This can also be written in the way that letter C is written. So I'm going to circle letter C because that one's correct. So I'll write my answers over here since I don't have the problems up on the board. But I think there's another one. So I'm going to try and simplify this a little bit more. I know that I can use my order of operations and do my multiplication before my addition, and then I'll see what I get. So I know 4 times 2 is 8, plus 4 times 5. Then we have another multiplication that we can simplify. So let's rewrite 8 plus 20. That looks exactly like letter D. So we have 2 equivalent expressions, C and D. The one thing to remember, which is also something we got tripped up on the MLQ with, is that you can use a distributive property when it's just numbers, just like we did in this problem. Some people got so used to seeing it with variables that they only were using it with variables. You can use it with numbers too. I want us to do one more example of the distributive property. This one is also just numbers. So rewrite using the distributive property. Again, that just means use the distributive property to distribute that number. So it's 2 times 4 plus 5. Now that we've reviewed what the distributive property is, I want you to pause this video. Remember, I'm trusting you to actually pause the video and then come back in 1 second and do it with me. Okay, I really hope you paused it by now. Let's go through it. All right, so I'm going to take this 2 outside of the parentheses and distribute it to the 2 numbers inside. So that means I'm going to multiply 2 times 4. You can do anything to represent multiplication. You can use parentheses, you can use a multiplication sign, as long as you know that what you're doing right here is multiplication. Then I keep my sign in the middle. That's really important. If that was a subtraction sign, this would be subtraction right here. But it's addition, so we keep that sign. And then we do 2 times 5. I'm going to just simplify this all the way for the heck of it, because now that we've done the distributive property, and it's all numbers, we don't have any variables, we can just solve it. So I'll just do 8, because 2 times 4 is 8, plus 2 times 5. Remember, when we use order of operations, we do multiplication first, and we also do multiplication starting all the way to the left, going to the right. So we do this one first, then 8 plus 10, which is 18. This would be exactly the same as simplifying what's in the expression first, but because it asks us to rewrite it using the distributive property, this is what it wanted. This is what the problem was asking for. It wanted to see this step right here. So make sure when you're solving these problems and it asks you to rewrite that you have that step and show that you understand what the distributive property is. Okay, continue with the rest of the problems independently. Again, the answers are up, but do not look at the answers until you finish the work. Just use it to check your work. It is very obvious to me when somebody's actually tried it on their own and when they've just copied down the answers. And just copying down the answers isn't incomplete, which means it will be a deduction. Once you finish, flip to the back. Then in your own words, describe what the distributive property is. Once you're done, go on ST Math. Good luck, guys.